Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 15th of January and you're joined by myself, Philip Nothard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 2, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. And once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
So we'll keep away from some of the social headlines that's been hitting the non-automotive world this week, Curtis. But we've got a couple of shout-outs, haven't we, this week?
We have indeed, yes. It's really about how you can get in touch with us. So we do have an email address, which is motortraderadio@yahoo.com. So if you have any press releases or you'd like to talk to us or come on the show, then do email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com. You can join our LinkedIn group or follow us on Twitter.
Yeah, and it's great to see so many of you listen to the show last week as the first show of 2022. But just as a reminder, and just what's available for your listening pleasure on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Deezer, which I know some of the listeners are aware of, some may not be aware of. And other areas as well. So wherever you get your favourite podcast, we are available on there. So do please search for us and listen to us.
Yeah, and on this week's show, we have a Menable moment from Steve Whitton. That's the first one of the year, so stay tuned for that. But first, the headlines. And as you sort of intimated, it may have been a quiet week for news elsewhere, but not in the motor trade. The headlines we've rounded up this week are: car dealer asks when will the used car pricing bubble burst? Pendragon on when car supply will return to some form of normality. Technicians at Mercedes-Benz Retail Group to strike over pay. GForces reveals bumper online car sales over festive period. We have the first dealer acquisition story of the year, so stay tuned for that. And finally this week is why 2021 was a bumpy year for potholes. But before we go any further, we do like acronyms on the podcast. And Phil, you've been in the news this week with a brand new acronym. So tell us all about that. So the story we've got is from Motor Trade News, and the headline is, well, in fact, I'll let you do the headline.
Yeah, I do apologise. I have to apologise in advance for this one because it has come up some. I've had some interesting texts off one or two contacts and emails, but the acronym is VUCA, and I'll pronounce it that way rather than VUCA because I think saying it as VUCA, it does get a little bit of a pushback in terms of that, but we won't go there. We don't know what people are doing as they listen to the podcast this morning. But essentially, I mean, yeah, you're right, Curtis. I mean, we looking at what's happening in the automotive sector, and the acronym is a strategic acronym that is used in the strategy sector, but it does stand for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Which, when you actually break it down that way, it was a good descriptive for the sector that we now in, particularly when it comes to used vehicle values as well. And I know through some of the social channels I've had other words associated with the acronym, trying to connect it to used cars.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So vehicle, used car, something or other. I've had all sorts of things. But yeah, I mean, we've titled it in terms of the new buzzword for the automotive sector. But essentially, what the point is trying to say is that we're looking at this, unpredictable change that is now potentially going to be a norm in certain industries and areas of the business world, essentially, particularly for the automotive sector. And the descriptive of the acronym is that you avoid traditional, outdated approaches to management and leadership. But actually, I think that really, we've talked about it several times, haven't we, Curtis, on the podcast, that what will be the norm that we return to? What do the industry need to look at as we head forward? What does the market look like?
Yeah, and it does actually tee up quite neatly the next couple of stories, which really addresses that volatility and what's happening in the market at the moment. So heading over to Car Dealer, and the headline there is, what will happen to used car prices in 2022? So that's very much a sort of $1 million question. And will they crash or continue to soar? So we did see this record high for used car prices over the course of 2021, and we've reported on this on a monthly basis because it was going up and up and up and up. So what they've done is they've gathered together a number of talking heads across the industry to really say what their view is on how prices are likely to pan out over the coming months. What did you make of this one, Phil?
Yeah, no, I mean, I was involved in terms of what my opinion was, and I think everybody tends to share that similar opinion that that there is a view across the market about what will happen. We've had this record high. I think Darren Martin's in there talking about the rises of over 27% since the beginning of 2021, and it's I think there's a bit of caution that people are when will it reset itself? Will values begin to drop? And I think essentially this is about people across the sector that are saying it's not about to drop anytime soon. There is no cliff edge on the horizon. There's no reason for heavy caution that we're going to see this demand and stabilisation for some time yet. And like you say there, Darren, who's obviously a regular on the podcast, and we will be getting Darren on again this month, but he shares his view that that this dip will be on a demand direction, or will prices pick up? And sort of asking that question with Darren and others of what their views are on the market.
Yeah, and one of the other talking heads quoted in the piece is Phil Jones, head of eBay Motors Group, who sponsored the podcast, and he actually shed some light on activity post-Christmas, which is another theme that we'll return to over the course of today's podcast. But he said the year started on a positive note, with buyer activity noticeably busy across eBay Motor Group's platforms, with many of its dealer partners benefiting from robust inquiry levels since the traditional Boxing Day bounce in online searches. And he goes on to say that following the Prime Minister's announcement of his decision not to step up the COVID restrictions, in-market buyers can now focus their attention on researching and purchasing their next car. And in fact, that announcement seems as though it was made weeks ago, but it wasn't, of course. The news cycle has moved on. But he does go on to say that the ongoing supply problems in the new car market will mean that demand for used cars will remain high, and again that's a theme that we'll return to.
Yeah, and it's that same tone was echoed by James Fairclough, who's the CEO of AA Cars, and he's talking that he doesn't expect that prices will fall across the board. Dealers have to contend with some stock shortages for a while, as with fewer new cars being sold, as you say there, Curtis, in 2020 and 2021. There'll also be fewer nearly new vehicles entering the second-hand market in 2022, and saying that some of the more recent models maybe therefore hold their value for longer than they would normally, particularly in the most popular models. So sort of highlighting there that there's the different vehicles entering the market, and back to the volatility and uncertainty that we were talking about earlier on in the previous story there, Curtis, that the vehicles coming into the market now are different. The OEMs, as we spoke to many times on the podcast, Curtis, that transition towards that electric vehicle market, the type of vehicles entering the sector new are different. The lineup is different, and the fuel types are different. So, we're going to see this for some time now that that there is going to be this stabilisation potentially of demand, but supply is not going to be anytime soon.
And following neatly on from that, we go over to AM Online, where the headline is Pendragon's CEO Bill Berman says car supplies could take 8 years to recover. So this is an interview that AM did with Bill, and it's worth heading over there because it is quite a detailed interview. But what's particularly interesting to us, I thought, was his comments on new and used car supplies. So he's saying they could take up to 8 years to recover, and that's following the component shortages that we've talked about, the various factory closures that were prompted by COVID, and he's saying that he's expecting this. He makes parallels. He makes quite an interesting parallel with the economic crash of 2008. And he says that one of the lessons learnt from that was that every year the sector is down, it actually takes 2 to 3 years to build it back up. So the way he sees it now, after the impact of these shortages and the COVID lockdowns, he's saying it's likely to take 5 to 7 to even 8 years for the new vehicle production cycle to get back to where it was.
Yeah, and I think that's the key with this, and I think where Bill's coming from there is that this is not just a single shortage of microchips. There are other things that play within what's hit the sector, efficiency, productivity, supply chain, all the way from your tier 1s through to your tier 4s. The market has changed, and he does make that point very clearly in this. And as you say there, we now, there's commentators saying that we're not going to see return of supply of reasonable levels of vehicles until the second half of this year. And some of that will be just replenishing what they've lost previously, never mind getting back to any kind of normality. So it could be into 2023 before you start to get a proper supply of vehicles coming in again. And he does make the point, because he further on in the story, and as you say, it's a very in-depth story, a great interview there with Bill by AM. And they talk to him about the values and the valuation market, and he's saying that as we've talked about, that they're open to older, higher mileage cars. If there's an 8-year-old 80,000 mile vehicle that is in good condition, then they'd absolutely sell that to a customer. They'd prep it to their highest of standards, but they would sell that vehicle to a customer. So it kind of shows where their strategic approach is changing as a consequence of supply constraints.
Yeah, and he does actually talk about the car store strategy. So this is Pendragon's multi-brand supermarket operation, and he does say that we'll see an addition of 10 new standalone sites over the coming time. So this is something that Pendragon, that they were quite early into that supermarket sector for a franchise group, and they did lose a bit of direction, but you can see the focus is well and truly back there. But they face the challenge, like every other retailer has, of getting hold of that stock.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, as I say, it's a good in-depth interview there with Bill from Pendragon. So head over to AM, as we always urge at the end of the show, to head over to the stories. But worth having a good look at this story, because he does share his view, and in fairness to Bill, he's got the credibility to share his view on a broader sector of the market, hasn't he, Curtis?
He has indeed. So you're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. And now we're delighted to welcome back our good friend Stephen Whitton for the first of this year's Men Able Moments, our regular look at mental health best practices in the motor trade. Somehow, we're already midway through January. I'm not quite sure how that happened. So Steve's actually going to reflect on the impact of time flying on our mental well-being.
Yeah, hi Phil, hi Curtis, and Happy New Year to you guys. When are we meant to stop saying that? Is it about Easter time? I don't know, I've kind of lost the plot. But anyway, here we are, mid-January. Wow, hasn't that flown past? It looks like, or it seems like it just yesterday that we were talking about Christmas and the wind down for, some time off, maybe a bit of a get-together with family and friends or not, and chilling, doing your own thing, whatever. And here we are already in mid-January. And so that's what I wanted to talk about today, really, is just about how quickly time genuinely flies. I constantly sort of wake up and think, wow, bloody hell, it's Thursday again. How did that happen? And, time really does just absolutely whiz past. And it's with that in mind that I wanted to mention something that's coming up next week. Rachel Murray, who's one of our amazing ambassadors, put a very honest post on LinkedIn about Blue Monday, which is this notional date around the middle of January, 17th of January this year. And I've got no idea what it's meant to mean, other than it's just, really this sort of notional label for a day mid-month where I guess what it's really aiming at is that realization that despite the break from Christmas and all the big build-up for that life goes on and we are back into the swing of things. It's still midwinter, so it's still cold and miserable outside quite often. We're not into spring or anything like that yet. January itself is a very long month, so that can add to the feeling of sort of being under pressure and, a bit of a long old slog. And of course, mid-month is typically when the credit card bill hits or you start getting back on top of your finances, or at least having a look at them and realising just, where you are in the world and life and so on. So for many people, Blue Monday is this sort of representation that, here we go again. And what I wanted to say was that really, time genuinely does fly. I used to laugh at my now late ex-father-in-law for making comments about how short it was between birthdays and Christmases as he was getting older. But he was absolutely right. Time literally does fly, and we're not on the planet for a very long time in reality. We're only renting a small amount of space for a very small amount of time. And it's very easy for me to say, make the most of that and do what you can and live for today and live your life and all the rest of it. And I do know from very personal experience that is very easy to say and much more easy to say than it is to do. So with that in mind, if next week is, bogging you down, making you feel a bit under the weather or whatever it might be, and talking of that, of course, we've still got this pandemic, I was going to say something else then, on the go that just seems to be lingering forever, then, reach out, have a chat with someone, have a conversation. There's enough of us around the Men Able movement now that you literally can pick up the phone and contact us, generally through LinkedIn or whatever, but speak to your colleagues as well. Be open and honest. And I literally have been blown away by the amount of that is happening in businesses where we are working with them and the rev counter analogy is going in and people are now starting to ask each other how they are day by day. So keep that in mind. Time really does whiz past. And if you are feeling a bit down and a bit depressed, a bit under the weather, genuinely, tomorrow is another day. And again, from personal experience, I literally can offer up that I have myself experienced that I could wake up one day and just literally think, I don't want to get out of bed, don't want to do anything, don't want to interact with the world. And yet the next day be completely the opposite. And no, that's not some undiagnosed illness I've got. That's just genuinely how life can be. And when I speak to other people, I'm not the only one to suffer with that. So keep that in mind. Time really does whiz past, and make the most of it. And don't be bogged down and don't be influenced by labels like Blue Monday. There's nothing blue about next Monday at all, other than what we make it. And we are all experts at that, by the way. We're all experts at taking a thought, letting it plant a seed in our mind and turning it into 1,000,001 other things that it quite often is not. So reach out, have a chat, and, let's get supporting each other. Now, I mentioned New Year's resolutions. I don't have any. I gave up on the whole stop eating chocolate, probably because I've got a fridge full of it still from Christmas that I'll be eating till Easter, or maybe even next Christmas. But what we have got on the go this year is that Menable is about curiosity. We're really curious about this industry now. We've done a whole load of stuff around raising awareness and getting people talking about this issue of mental health and well-being. And now I'm curious. I'm curious to know what we need to do to help managers and leaders embrace it and really head towards culture change and working practice change that this industry desperately needs, but is very, very well placed to achieve. So I'm curious. And that, of course, includes the whole diversity and inclusion agenda as well, because I'm absolutely convinced that there's a mental health angle to the reasons why we are, potentially struggling with that. So look out for more stuff over the coming weeks and months. Of course, we'll be back with another Menable Moments in a couple of weeks. But for now, Happy New Year. I've already said that. Happy New Year again. And we'll catch up soon. Cheers, guys. Take care. Bye.
And there again. So welcome back, Steve, to 2022. We don't know when the cut-off point is for saying Happy New Year. I think Steve's probably used all his Happy New Years now.
I think he has, yeah. I think that's it.
But very thought-provoking. And
yeah.
As you say, the we as a business at Cox Automotive talking about the Blue Monday, and I suppose it's what you make it, isn't it? That's, if you want it to be a Blue Monday, then it's going to be a Blue Monday, isn't it? But it is what it is.
Yeah, I must admit, I wasn't aware that it was Blue Monday coming up, so I would have been totally oblivious, which I think probably would have been a benefit, but it is what you make of it. You're absolutely right. And it's worth just reminding listeners that if you want to get in touch with Steve Whitton and Menable, then just head over to menable.org or follow him on LinkedIn. He's very active on social media, and he would appreciate you reaching out to him.
Definitely. And the next story, heading over to motortrader.com. Now, I'm not sure in the 7 years or so that we've been doing the podcast, and generally in the industry, we've ever associated a strike, the word strike, with the automotive sector, Curtis. But
You're absolutely right, because I've been writing about the sector for over 20 years, and I've never come across or written a story about a strike in the sector, which is just absolutely amazing. But the story from Motor Trader, the headline is "Technicians at Mercedes-Benz Retail Group to Strike Over Pay." So this is the possibility of a strike for 4 days later this month. It's a pay dispute, and it involves union representation from Unite and Mercedes-Benz Retail Group, who actually were due to meet on Friday to try and sort out what was going to happen. But Unite said that 185 of its members across 9 Mercedes-Benz retail sites had voted to hold strike action after they faced a second year without a pay rise.
Yeah, it's not good, is it? I mean, like you say, they've got this talk about Mercedes-Benz Retail Group that employs 1,200 colleagues, and which is just a sixth covered by the collective bargaining arrangements. So, yeah, like I say, it's a bit of an interesting one, this one, and I think as we're recording the podcast, I think it's going through, isn't it? I think there's talks at the minute, so I presume by the time we get to next week's podcast, we'll find out what actually happened, whether they got the pay rise or not, or whether actually was there a walkout and what the next stage of that was going to be. But as you say there, Curtis, it's not a word that we've necessarily ever associated with the automotive sector before.
Not really since the 70s when when it was applied on a regular basis to factories. So this is astonishing. Really,
you were close to bringing politics back into the podcast then, weren't
you? Yeah, I know. It won't go away, will it?
So heading over to the next story here, and returning to AM Online, and this is where we've got GForces reveals bumper online car sales over the festive period. Now, we're just starting to get a little bit of activity, aren't we, around what's been happening over that Christmas to New Year and the first sort of trading period of the new year. And this is that GForces are saying that car retailers experienced a 32% year-on-year increase on online sales in the 2 weeks over Christmas and the New Year period. Now, I suppose the caveat with some of this is obviously, year on year we're in a sort of a click and collect environment, weren't we? With that same period last year, because obviously we had the lockdown in November, and as we head into that sort of Q1 of 2021, and we're in a sort of that limited of click and collect. So I suppose the year on year is a slightly different representation, isn't it?
Yeah, but even with those caveats, the data is quite interesting because GForces say that there was an increase of nearly 50% in online car sales on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. I mean, I'm astonished that anyone finds time to go online to buy a car on Christmas Day. I mean, Christmas Eve and certainly Boxing Day, I can understand, but Christmas Day. So, and the number of cars sold on Christmas Day increased by 48% compared to 2020. With Christmas Eve purchases up by 49%. But interestingly, across the GForces customer portfolio, it saw the average price of cars purchased on Christmas Day actually rise to £24,500 from £18,000 in 2020. I think we can factor in a lot of that price inflation from last year into that one.
Yeah, there's little bits in here, and I quite like where they've looked at the purchase use. So what they're saying is that the data that they've looked at revealed that 60% of those festive car purchases occurred on a mobile phone. So that was a 24% increase on the same period of 2020. But also, they were saying that a key trend that's starting to emerge is the use of Apple Pay to reserve a vehicle, with twice as many car buyers using the payment method on Christmas Day of 2021 compared to the previous year. So not only are they searching on Christmas Day there, Curtis, they're actually using Apple Pay to reserve the vehicle on Christmas Day. I think they need to get the charades out or something, or some Monopoly board games on Christmas Day by the sounds of it. But like you say, I didn't have much time to sit on my phone on Christmas Day. Not sure about yourself.
Not at all, but I'm sure you made up for it on Boxing Day.
There was, yeah. So again, a good in-depth story there from AM Online. So have a look at that, and it's great stats coming out of GForces there and what they've been looking at in terms of those key trends, particularly in that digital e-commerce marketplace.
And staying with AM Online, we've got the first dealer acquisition of the year, and the headline is Lloyd Motor Group expands with Kia through Ray-Rig Motors acquisition. So this is Lloyd Motor Group, who I know you know well, Phil. They're based north of England and up to the Scottish borders as well. Multi-franchise group representing BMW, Jaguar, Land Rover, Mini Volvo and Kia. So they've acquired these sites from Ray-Rig Motors, who are a Windermere-based Kia group operating 2 sites. My understanding is Ray-Rig, it's a family-owned business, and they're exiting the business and have sold up to Lloyd Motor Group. So it's a good purchase for Lloyd. They're a AM listed group, and it does see them expand their Kia portfolio. Yeah,
and it's quite a broad portfolio of brands, isn't it? Because they're saying that Kia, alongside the Kia that they represent, BMW, Mini, Jaguar, Land Rover, and Volvo, they've got the BMW Motorrad and Honda motorcycles franchise as well. So quite a diverse portfolio of brands there. But again, a great move there from them expanding further across their representation across that sort of northern territory from Cumbria up into Scotland there. So a great sort of view within weeks of the first new year that we've seen that acquisition trail start again.
Yeah, the acquisition goes through, it's completed, it's due to be completed at the end of February, and AM does actually say that it covers 2 sites in Windermere and Morecambe, and AM say that Lloyd has revealed that it will just maintain the Morecambe facility following the takeover, but will be taking on all of Ray Riggs' existing staff as part of this acquisition.
And we've got an interesting, and finally, again, heading over to This Is Money, and never let us down on the headlines, but a very interesting one here from Rob Hull, who starts that Britain's pothole pandemic, misery for drivers as pothole-related breakdowns reach a ridiculous 3-year high. Now, interesting this one, that for the commuters that we've been through lockdowns and working from home, that actually it's accelerated through a period where there's less people being on the road predominantly.
Yeah, so there's less drivers on the road. We're clocking up fewer miles, but we've got more potholes than we've ever had before. So the RAC said it received over 10,000 call-outs for car issues caused by damaged road surfaces last year, and that was a year-on-year rise of 19%. And I love this bit, Phil. The RAC released the figures on National Pothole Day. So,
who knew?
Yeah. Now, why didn't they have National Pothole Day on Blue Monday? That would have made perfect sense.
Just to add to the misery of Blue Monday, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But and it goes on to say concerns of a pothole pandemic in Britain.
I mean, it is an issue, isn't it? I mean,
it is. Yeah.
I mean, locally, and I'll add this in, but so locally, there's as everywhere else, people complaining about the condition of the roads and condition of the drainage of the roads and potholes being a major issue. But it's always so interesting when the council actually do decide to close a road to resurface it, the amount of complaints that you get, why you've closed it and how long it's going to be closed for, and the diversions and things like that. I think sometimes you can't do right for doing wrong with it, Curtis, I think in many ways, but you're right. I think it's interesting that, as you said right at the start there, that fewer commuters, fewer annual mileage being driven, yet the increase is up, and there's insurer Admiral also said it had seen a 39% in claims made by motorists for the repair costs related to pothole damage compared to 2016. So it's a significant rise of claims, that, isn't it?
It is, yeah, and while clearly garages benefit from the work, I'm sure all of us would rather have better roads.
Yeah, most definitely. So that's it for this week. So again, as we said all the way through, there's some great stories this week, some great headlines there. So please do head over to the relevant media, where that's Car Dealer, AM, Motor Trader, Business Car, This Is Money, and any of the others. You do head over. Some great in-depth investigation there by them on many of the stories and some great insight. But it's a busy week again in the automotive trade, Curtis.
So that's all for this week. You've been listening to the weekly Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. Many thanks for joining us for all the chat that matters. We're back again next week. Until then, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.